So we need to know these basic facts. Many of them I know you know, but I'm just going to write them out so you have a place to reference them. Sine is always smaller than or equal to 1, right? Because you know sine of x, nice curvy thing, it's always smaller than 1. Same with cosine of x, right? Great different graph, but it's always smaller than or equal to 1. Sine squared stays smaller than or equal to 1, as does cosine squared. So e to the x, let's think about the graph of e to the x. It's always bigger than 0, as is e to the negative x. That's always bigger than or equal to 0. So secant and cosecant, those are the cups that come off of cosine or sine. When I square those cups, all of those cups stay above the x-axis, even above 1, right? And the cups look a little different with cosecant, but they're always above 1. So these are facts that I'm going to want you to know. So I'm going to talk through some things, and you're going to think this is really boring and pretty straightforward, but I'm just hoping to clear up and make solid some ideas. So let's start here. Don't we know that 1/8 is a bigger number than 1/9? Yes. 1/9 has the number 1/9. The 9 is larger than the 8, right? So that's what makes this a smaller quantity. All right. So I picked this. Like you can even plug in x = 3. So if I plug in x = 3, I get 1/9. If I plug in x = 3, I get 1/8. This is smaller. So I'm going to want you to be able to see it without x's, or I'm sorry, without numbers and with x's. So this is smaller because this has more on the denominator. All right, so looking at 1/9 and 1/11, this has more on the denominator, so this is going to be smaller. So again, you could put in x = 3. This has more on the denominator, so this is smaller. So that's why the inequality goes this way. All right, so now I'm going to want you to think about how to put inequalities in here. So you might be able to see it quickly. I'm going to go through just to make sure you really see how you could build it how you could build it. So what do you know about e to the negative x? And you don't have to write this. I just want you to be able to think this. E to the negative x is bigger than 0. I could add 1 to both sides. So if I add 1 to both sides, I get this. Then if I take both sides of this and divide it by x root x, that still keeps the inequality. So this is a larger quantity than this. Okay, so let's start on this one with what I know about sine squared. What do I know about sine squared? Sine squared is always smaller than or equal to 1. Oh, and it's not going to matter to me if we put less than or equal to. So it does, yeah, this one I guess it is strictly less than, but it doesn't matter to me. Okay, less than or equal to 1. Then what if I divide both sides of this by x squared plus 2? Right, so that keeps the inequality the same. Okay, I need another inequality here. So what do I know about this compared to this? This has more on the denominator than this does, so that makes this smaller, right? Again, I'm not going to care whether you put less than or equal to, so don't be worrying about that at all. Sometimes I'm going to forget. Sometimes I'll just put less than, and it could be less than or equal to. It doesn't matter. Okay, all right. Never will I take off points or penalize you in any way for putting less than if it's less than or equal to. Okay, let's compare these two. I'm always looking to see which one's the smaller, so I can say that has more on the denominator. That has more on the denominator, so that's smaller. Okay, which has more on the denominator to be smaller? This is subtracting. So this actually has more on the denominator because I'm taking away on that side, on the denominator. All right, so here I'm going to think, you don't even have to write this, but I'm just going to think, don't I know that secant squared is bigger than or equal to 1, right? Then if I take this and divide both sides by x minus 1, and just to make some of you happy, I'll put that there. Okay, so now what about between these two? Which has more on the denominator? This one will have more on the denominator, so that makes it smaller. Okay. So let's start off with cosine of x. What do I know about cosine of x? It's smaller than or equal to 1. Now I've got plus 1. So can I take cosine of x and add 1, to both sides? Cosine of x plus 1. 1 plus 1 gives me 2. Oh, that's the numerator right there, isn't it? Okay, if I take both sides of this and divide it by this x squared plus x, the inequality stays the same, so that stays there. Now I'm looking to see which has more on the denominator between these two. Which has more on the, this one has more on the denominator, so that makes it smaller.